Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Matt Goes to the Movies. We are rolling along, and it seems odd, but this journey is almost at an end, culminating with Spider-Man No Way Home. But before we get there, we are on to Spider-Man Homecoming. Really excited for this episode. One, because I really enjoy this movie, but two, I am joined by Rob and Harrison. So always excited to get the three of us together. So Rob, I'll start with you. Welcome back. You've been here for every one of these Spider-Man ones so far, and I think we're in for a good one today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed every minute of my rewatch of this movie. You kind of forget how good it is. You kind of forget how magical this movie is. And just so enjoyable. And I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys. And I kind of think because Harrison sort of bailed on us for a few of these, I think as punishment, and it is the right time of year for it. I think he should have to do an episode on the Star Wars holiday special. I think he should have to for bailing on us.
I probably want to be like waterboarded than watch that again. But Harrison, welcome back. A couple things going on. You weren't able to join us for the Amazing Spider-Man 2, but you are back for Homecoming. So welcome back, man.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to be here. Sadly, I couldn't make it last episode. I've never seen the Star Wars Holiday Special, so maybe it's time.
Oh, boy.
Do a mini episode.
Grab a bottle of Frank's Red Hot and pour it in your eyes. It's the same thing. So, and probably actually hurts less than watching that.
It is the debut of Boba Fett, though.
That is true. Oh, man. God, that's another one. Oh, boy, coming up here at the end. But a totally different episode and different show for Boba Fett. But Spider-Man Homecoming, the first entry for Tom Holland to have his solo movie for Spider-Man. And one thing we're going to do here is we're going to get into the watch rating segment where it's based on 3 tiers, high, medium, or low. How rewatchable is this movie based on a number of factors? But the one thing we wanted to do too is because Rob and I did an Infinity Saga recap months back, feels like a lifetime ago now. And Harrison, part of the first thing that was the basement binge was talking about these MCU movies and ranking them. So as we're going through our watch rating, we're also going to talk about where we had this film. And for all three of us, when we did these ratings, it was based out of the 23 movies that brought up the Infinity Saga. So we did not include Black Widow, Eternals, or Shang-Chi. So I'm going to go first. And my watch rating for this movie is high. It is definitely worth rewatching. It is definitely something that I would throw on at a whim just to solo watch it. Doesn't have to be in order of the MCU movies or anything like that. I love Tom Holland's portrayal as Spider-Man. I love how they write this character. I think his first movie, we talked about it with the Sam Raimi movies. He is more in line with what I know of Spider-Man in this world. I know some people have some problems and call him Iron Man Jr., or they don't like some of the stuff that they've done with him. But I think this movie has almost everything in it. It's got laughs. It has high stakes. It has a really great villain who I want to talk about further. But when I first did the Infinity Saga review with Rob, I had this rated at number 10 out of 23. And on my rewatch, I'd be hard pressed that maybe this doesn't move up based on how I feel about this movie and some of the performances that I saw in it. So, Harrison, I'm going to go over to you next with your watch rating and where you actually had this movie when you did your overall rankings.
So my overall rankings of the MCU way back at the start of the basement binge, it's at the time of rating it, it's number 1 out of the 23 MCU films.
Ooh.
So pretty high up there. I have some positive thoughts about this film. It's kind of interesting, though, because I know this film isn't perfect. And as I was preparing for this episode, I was reading some of the thoughts that people have about it. And a lot of it seems to be a little bit negative. And while I can understand those and maybe even agree with them, there is, on top of the fun and appreciation I have for the film, there's an emotional resonance this film has with me that makes it so high up on the list. You know, that when a film impacts you in your life, legitimately in your life, it makes it better, even with its flaws. So, yeah, that's why it's on the list. I'm very excited for this episode.
Yeah, Rob, close this segment out. Where do what's your watch rating, and where did you have this when we went over the Infinity Saga?
So, watch rating, it's high, but it's not just high. It's kind of like redlined high. I mean, what are you looking for in a movie that this does not deliver? I enjoyed literally almost every single moment that I spent rewatching this movie. And I'm sitting there watching it, getting ready to do this, and I'm thinking back to where we had it on our original rankings, and I knew that I didn't have it like top 5 or even top 7. I knew that it was in the top 50%, and I'm thinking to myself, how the hell did I not have this higher than where I did? I had it like 12th, I think. And I'm looking back on that now going, how are there 11 MCU films that were better than this? Like it's that recency principle where I'm sure if I did go back and rewatch some of those that I had originally ranked higher than this, I might still feel that way. But just to say right off the top of your head, don't think about it too much. Where do you have this movie ranked? I could see myself bumping this into my top 5. This is probably it's got to be in my top 10 now, easily, and not even having to try too hard. It's going to slide a lot of things right out of the way. Is it a perfect movie? No, but in terms of, is this perfect entertainment? Yes, 100%. It's one of those things where I can understand if somebody likes a movie I dislike, or somebody dislikes a movie I do like. Occasionally, I would say in most cases I can kind of see where somebody's coming from. But if you tell me you absolutely don't like this movie, I kind of struggle to understand that. I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes just to try to see what it was, and it wasn't 100%. And I'm trying to go through the negative, like the people who gave a negative review on it that were, film critics, and I'm going, I literally don't understand your complaint. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, this is one of the ones where I am always interested to see like what people's negativity with this is, because again, it's so good to me, this movie. But that'll be things that we get into here as we switch focus and we get into popcorn time. Now, listeners, if you have been following the show, popcorn time is where we are going to talk about this movie with spoilers. So for any reason, if you have not seen Spider-Man Homecoming and you're like going through these movies as we're going through them, this is where you stop so you're not spoiled, because we're going to get into heavy spoilers with popcorn time. And the first thing that I want to talk about that I really like about this movie, and then I'm sure we'll talk about in Far From Home, is this movie to me does the best job out of any of these movies that we've talked about so far with really showing you that Peter Parker is a kid. I think, I say a kid, he's in high school, but he really is just a young kid who is trying to do the right thing with these powers. I think he has a really good line in Civil War when he talks about not joining the football team because he's had these powers for 6 months, but he's been him his whole life. And if he couldn't play football then, he shouldn't now, because that wouldn't be right. And I think they do, for everything that I know people have said about what they don't like about Spider-Man in this universe, being connected to Iron Man and everything else. I think them portraying him as a kid comes across really, really well. So, Harrison, I'll switch over to you first. And just what are your thoughts on the portrayal of, Holland being in school, and definitely, he's gotten older now, but I feel like when Civil War came out in this movie, he's really the first actor that was like, yeah, okay, he doesn't look like he's like 27 years old playing a kid in high school.
Yeah, I really love him. My brain has become scrambled eggs because of the way I'm watching these Spider-Man movies, between your episodes and the short mini ones I'm doing for mine. I'm currently watching all 3 of the Spider-Man series at the same time. It's horrible.
Oh, God.
So, like, literally earlier today, I was watching Spider-Man 2, like, right before we recorded this. So my brain is combining them all together. But what is interesting is to jump between each version of Peter Parker and see the things that work really good about each one. And the thing that surprised me the most about Tom Holland's version is that he does feel so young. Like, he's kind of old. Well, I mean, Tom Holland's still young. I didn't mean that the right way, but he, in the film, he genuinely feels like a teenager. He genuinely feels like a kid in high school who's kind of excited and way in over his head and trying to do way too many things, and is just as excited about being Spider-Man as his classmates are about Spider-Man. It really, really works. The performance, I think, is fantastic. Just from like the teenage nature of it, but also the emotional beats. I think everything I've always loved about Spider-Man, Tom Holland gets really right. The emotional stakes, the trying to live up to that responsibility, trying to do the right thing, sometimes doing too many things and having to suffer the consequences of it. Grasping too much, or biting off more than you can chew type of thing, and just learning responsibility and how to balance that responsibility while also just being excited about being Spider-Man. Some of my favorite comics to read is when Spider-Man is just excited to be there. Like it's the end of the world, but Peter Parker is excited to meet Wolverine or whatever, and all of those things I think Tom Holland captures perfectly.
Yeah, Rob, what are your thoughts on, the solo outing for Holland portraying this character?
He brings this youthful exuberance to both the role of Peter Parker and the role of Spider-Man. We've kind of talked about it before, but Spider-Man is one of those characters, much like Batman, where the alter ego and the superhero are really 2 different characters that have to be kind of portrayed 2 different ways. There's Tony Stark is Iron Man and Iron Man is Tony Stark. There's no difference there. Captain America and Steve Rogers are the same person. There's not really a duality. There's not 2 aspects of the personality. And I think Spider-Man and Peter Parker are very much like that, like how we think about Batman and what actor can portray a good Bruce Wayne, but not necessarily Batman and vice versa. And he has this just energy and this excitement level that he brings to it, much like what Harrison said, that it's hard not to let it infect you. And I don't mean infect in kind of any kind of negative connotation. Like you can't help but get caught up in the energy and the fun that Peter Parker is having, even when things aren't going well. And I think one of the things that this film does really well is we don't get an unnecessary origin story that we don't need. It's just wasted time. It gets right into Peter and as Spidey, swinging, and we don't have to go through 45 minutes to an hour of him not having powers and then getting powers and learning how to use his powers and all of that stuff. It gets right to the action. We, the audience, know who Spider-Man is. Like, you don't have to kill Uncle Ben for us. We're fine. We're good. We don't need it. We don't need to see a different version of a radioactive spider biting him. It just gets right to it, and it's fun almost the entire way through the movie. I really enjoy Holland as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think, both very well said. A youthful exuberance that he brings to the role. I think it's really good too that he does a lot of his own stunt work in this. It brings a sense of realness that he's actually in the costume doing things. I think that adds to the performance. So not only is he really good, but I'd like to get this part out of the way, because if you saw the posters for this when it first came out, I think there was a lot of trepidation that this movie might be taken over by Iron Man. And I think that they did a very good job of only having Tony Stark in this at necessary moments. And I think when he's in this, I think, this really does also start to show the change in Tony, where he wants to help this kid and he wants to take care of him. And that speech after, we'll get into that scene where Parker messes up and he has to, save those people on the boat. Listening to Stark tell him, like, I wanted you to be better, and if you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. I think they did a really good job, but I also think they balanced it, because I know I heard a lot of people say that they were really worried that Iron Man would take over this movie and this wouldn't be a true Spider-Man film. I don't think that has happened at all. Rob, I'll defer to you first. What did you think about that? Did you like Robert Downey Jr.'s time in here? Do you think he's a little bit too much? Like, what are your thoughts on, Spider-Man really being connected to Iron Man?
So, full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of Robert Downey Jr., and I think his portrayal of Tony Stark is fantastic, and almost like it's very hard to critique him at any point of like any real major critique of anything he does throughout his time through the MCU. So just throwing that out there, I actually didn't get a chance to see this in theaters. I didn't see it till it was already released on video. And I had heard that, some people had said, oh, it's just Iron Man 4. And if you actually go through some of the negative reviews that you can find online for this movie, that's one of the things that does come up, is that it's too much Iron Man. And I simply don't understand that at all. Clock his screen time. He's in it for less than Ned. He's in the movie less than Aunt May. He's really not on screen more than most of these characters at all. Certainly not. There's very few moments of this movie that Spider-Man or Peter Parker is not on screen. This is 100% a Spider-Man movie. And anybody who says it's, there was too much time with Iron Man, I don't know what movie you watched. I don't. The parts that he is featured make sense. He needs to be there for those parts of the movie. That's how this story is moving along. In this universe, he's brought in by Iron Man to help with the fight at the German airport. And then from there, he can't just kind of drop them all together. So these things need to happen. And certainly with the way that the story progresses into Infinity War and then, Endgame and certainly into the next Spider-Man film, you need that relationship between Iron Man and Spider-Man to exist. Otherwise, it just doesn't have the same impact.
Harrison, where do you stand on the Tony Stark and Peter Parker relationship, and do you think he's used too much in this movie?
First is seeing Iron Man. It made me realize how much. Let me rephrase that. Let me start this. I know it was over. Seeing Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man reminds me why he has been such a great character throughout the Infinity Saga. We've had the MCU still going on for a while without him. And it's a good reminder why he was so great. That was the first thought I had. Second, I think that this does balance a good thing. Like, obviously, it was actually Sony's idea to include Iron Man. And I think that is largely because they wanted it to be obvious that they were part of the MCU and not doing their own thing. But I also think that it works. Spider-Man, particularly at this age, needs an outside source. Not of motivation, that's the wrong word, but he needs an Uncle Ben, and they didn't want to use Uncle Ben, and they used Iron Man. And it's really interesting because in the past few films we've had Uncle Ben who teaches Spider-Man the initial lesson. Hey, you've been given a gift. You need to be responsible. And it's Spider-Man trying to honor that teaching of Uncle Ben. Well, now Spider-Man's already had that, right? He gets it. And now it's trying to, well, actually, I'll get into that later. I'm getting way too ahead of myself because I'm really excited to talk about it. To shorten my answer, I think the time Iron Man is here works really well for for Spider-Man to play off of, to be a motivation for Spider-Man, for the ethos of the film. And I think the way Robert Downey Jr. plays as Iron Man works really, really well. If you're going to make Spider-Man a kid, a teenager, needs to be a parental figure there, and a distant but protective Tony Stark is a great way to do it.
Yeah, great points, guys. And like I said, I kind of wanted to get that out of the way because I feel like I could spend forever on this next part. Rob, from our review, you probably know how much I feel like strongly about this character, but the main plot of this movie revolves around the fact that Michael Keaton's character, who eventually becomes Vulture, runs a cleanup crew who was tasked with cleaning up the Battle of New York, and they get put out of a job because of Tony Stark and the government, which causes him to go rogue, so to speak, and take that technology because he is trying to provide for his family. And, I have to say, Michael Keaton, he has played Batman. He was in Birdman. I love him in this movie, The Other Guys, as Captain Gene with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell. I think he's great. But man, did he, for me, put in a performance in this movie. And he can go from charming to intimidating to almost downright, like, to me, scary in the one scene where he just, like, the calculated look in his eyes when he's talking to Peter. I think he was absolutely fantastic in this movie, but also, a character driven motivation that I feel came off as very, very real in this movie. And that's what makes it work so well for me, is that it feels totally natural, his development into why he goes down this path the way that he does. Rob, I'll let you go first on that.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Michael Keaton a lot. I personally, you see him in this movie, and I remembered how good he was, but then I started seeing the beginning of it, and I saw, just continue with this performance, and I went, okay, I remember he was good. Damn, I think I might have actually not remembered how good he really was, though. Criminally underrated as an actor. I want to go through just a few films from his filmography just for a second here. Let's start with Beetlejuice. You go from that to Batman Returns, of course. And then Multiplicity, one of my all-time favorite just silly comedies that if you've not seen Multiplicity, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's hysterical. He jumps from that to all kinds of other things. We get him in this movie, and it's just an unbelievable range that this one actor can do, and is phenomenal in each of those roles that I just mentioned. Matt, you talked about the car scene. We definitely talked about this as part of the MCU recap. That scene is terrifying, intimidating, all these things at once. I mean, he's all over emotionally in this movie in such a phenomenal way. And I'm sitting there, and I had remembered that the car scene was really well done. And still I'm watching it, and I'm just drawn in. I mean, I can't take my eyes off the screen when that scene is happening. It's just pulling you in, and it's so well executed, so well acted. And you think about what Keaton has to work off of. Peter Parker has almost no lines at all, no dialogue, nothing to work off of, and he just puts this thing out there. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. This is maybe one of the top 5 scenes in the entire MCU. Like, you think about 23 films, for the Infinity Saga at least, and you think about the best scenes, the top scenes in the whole thing. I mean, just right off the top of my head, I could see this being in my top 5 without actually sitting down and writing out like each of the great scenes of this saga. This one could easily be in the top 5. There's some that I know for a fact would be higher, but would it be weird? Like if you said, oh yeah, that's top 5, like, no, you could see that happening, right?
Yeah, I absolutely could. And Harrison, I wanted to let you go last because I wanted to give you the opportunity, because I know you actually don't like Michael Keaton's performance in this movie. So tell me I'm wrong, I'm lying. But what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, you are lying. I love Michael Keaton. I think he does a fantastic job. Especially, we talk about how the MCU has a villain problem. Okay, I can admit that. Spider-Man in the Sony universe definitely has a villain problem. There are some great villains. I just watched Spider-Man 2. Doc Ock, fantastic. Green Goblin, fantastic. But every single one of the villains we've seen in the Spider-Man films so far have been villains that have something that happened to them, and then they kind of alters their mindset, and then they go and have a rampage of one sort. Green Goblin Green Goblin, he gets the serum that makes him go kind of crazy. Otto Octavius, he gets the arms that kind of take over his mind. In the Amazing Trilogy Spider-Man films, Lizard, he becomes a lizard, and that kind of makes him go crazy, like we talked about in that episode. This is a character that feels like is completely an agent of his own, if that makes sense. It's not outside things are happening to him. That's life. That happens to everybody. But it's not one of those things that's like, hey, we need our bad guy to do some bad things. Let's just like give him this thing that makes him do bad things just because. You can really understand the progression of this character to go from being out of a job to petty crimes like stealing from a cleanup, and then to becoming an arms dealer, to then being willing to kill a kid. Like even in that scene when the first Shocker guy, when he kills him, and he like disintegrates into a bunch of ash. He's like, I thought this was the anti-gravity gun. Like, you can tell that his intention was not to kill someone in that scene, but it's a progression, and that's just the next step. To then that incredible scene like you talked about in the car. I love the performance of Vulture. I think it's one of the best villains in the MCU that's kind of forgotten, and I'm glad that he's still here, that he wasn't wiped out like so many villains are. I think Michael Keaton's performance is fantastic. He really is an underrated actor.
Yeah, that was something that I really enjoyed, was the fact that he made it through the movie. Certainly we will, we know we're going to see some part of him in Morbius, which is just around the corner. It's crazy to think about, like, actually how quickly that's coming after a while, and just how fast everything seems to be flowing now. But yeah, I was so pleased that it wasn't the typical, okay, it's a one-off villain, we don't see him. I have not heard any rumors about him being in No Way Home. Who knows? Maybe we somehow see something of him in that movie, but I really hope we get more of him, because again, he feels natural. Keaton turned in a great performance. He certainly knew who Spider-Man was before it was made known to the public. So, does that change anything? Does that maybe change anything with him, depending on what happens in No Way Home? Because he, at the end of this movie, keeps Peter's secret really out of a sign of respect. And I appreciated that so much, that, it was one of those, okay, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to be by my hand, but I still kind of like, I owe you a debt. And he said that to him in the car, that you saved my daughter's life. That's a debt I can never repay. So I'm giving you one chance to walk away. Don't get in my business. And I just, I get goosebumps when I watch that scene where he's just like, if you get in my business again, I'll kill you. I'll kill you dead. And I'm like, just the way that he looks at Peter, I'm like, oh, he means that. Like, and Harrison, it's like you said, that natural progression of, oh, I thought it was the anti-gravity gun, I didn't mean to actually hurt this guy and kill him, to, no, I will kill you if it means protecting my family. It's just, to me, it is one of the more natural progressions in the MCU. And even, around the Spider-Man movies, I feel like he's one of the most natural progressions, from a guy trying to just provide for his family to, I need to take extreme measures to get what I need.
Definitely. I think that, hit it right on the head when you're saying that sometimes the villains is just like, okay, he has something happen to him and he goes crazy. He felt very grounded in reality. This seems like this could happen to a lot of people.
He doesn't seem crazy. He's not like insane. It's just he's made a choice.
Yeah, and each choice leads him to push his line of what he's okay with a little bit further, and that pushes the line a little bit further, and then he has to keep pushing that line until he's ready to kill a 15-year-old kid. I just want to talk about for a second, when Peter shows up at their house to open the door for, picking up his date to homecoming, and it's Adrian Toomes that opens the door. That is such a phenomenally well shot and edited scene, because there is just no foreshadowing of any sort that he is her dad. Like, you have no reason to believe that. You have no reason to expect him to be the one opening the door. And even though I know it's going to happen, every time I've watched this movie, I've had an audible reaction to it because it's so well done. I love that moment of this movie.
I got to end on, I love that scene as well. It puts your heart right in your stomach, like just sinks it instantly, no matter how many times I see it. I also think that it's great for the character of Adrian Toomes and also for Peter Parker. Like, everything that means for Peter Parker trying to be Spider-Man, but also to have understanding, be like, that's what this guy's trying to protect. Like, that's why he's going to such lengths. He has this, nice home and his family that he's got to, keep providing for this luxuriously living. That's the lie that he's telling. And that's the lie that he's willing to kill for. And it makes the progression of the threat that he is scarier, because he's a family guy. He's not just some psychopath. And you can tell he means business. And it also it raises the stakes for Spider-Man in an emotional way. It doesn't raise the stakes for the sake of the multiverse or whatever it is going to be in No Way Home. It raises the stakes emotionally for Spider-Man.
Yeah, and I want to point out, too, that he doesn't have a lot, but I think, the way that Tom Holland reacts in the car to his threat, and, when he's like, hey, why don't you head on in? I got to give Peter the dad talk. And he casually just grabs the gun out of the glove box, and he's like, does she know? And Peter, I really like, too, how he just, he tries to play it off while you can still see, this kid is sweating bullets. And he's like, knows what? Oh, close to the vest. Okay. But also, too, I know it's not supposed to probably be funny because this kid is terrified. But when he walks into the house and she's like, is that a corsage? And he's like, here. And he just kind of slaps it up against her arm. For some reason, I laugh at it, and I'm like, the probable, the fear, the confusion, all the different emotions that are probably running through Peter at that moment when he's trying to piece together, oh man. And again, I think, too, it's not only, he's not only thinking about it in terms of Spider-Man, he's thinking about it in terms of Peter Parker. This affects him in two ways. One, he knows who this villain is now. Two, oh man, and they explore this further in Far From Home. Oh man, I like this girl, and I know he has bigger things, but again, it's how much he has to deal with as a kid in this universe is unbelievable. I just want to reiterate that I think they did such a good job of showcasing really how hard it is probably for Peter to be Spider-Man and just want to do kid things sometimes. He just wants to go to the dance, and he's super excited to go do this, and he gets the door answered with that slap in the face.
It's a really good point. Other parts of the movie, he wants to go to the pool with the pretty girl, and he has to go be Spider-Man instead. One of the things that I think this film does really well between that duality is it shows the real world problems of Peter Parker, and that's always been a hallmark of the character in the comics, without dragging the movie down, sucking the energy out of it, and taking all of the fun away, which is one of my critiques of the original Sam Raimi trilogy. They spend so much time making Peter's life suck that the movie stops being fun to watch. And at no point in this movie do I really feel that. I think it just sets up the conflict of this poor 15-year-old kid who has to navigate all of these things in his head and has to play in the world of adults while he still is trying to figure out what he wants to be when he grows up. He's still struggling to talk to girls. He doesn't know how to tie a tie, all of these really funny things that happen, and making me think back to my time in high school. And now all of a sudden, some of the things that I'm going to do are going to decide the fate of the world. it's a really well balanced approach that they took in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, I was trying to figure out if I wanted to spend $1.50 on a peanut butter cookie for lunch. Like, I wasn't getting threatened at gunpoint by my girlfriend's dad.
I never had that either.
A little more low key than
Peter
Parker.
Yeah.
So Harrison, I'm going to let you kind of take over this next segment, and Rob and I will play off you. Well, next segment, but this talking point, because I know there's a scene that you really like, and one thing that I want to switch to is how much Spider-Man, and Harrison, I think you did a really, really good video on this, so we're going to have to get the link because I think you did a really good job. I think this movie does another really good job of showcasing just how strong Spider-Man actually is. I really like how they do that. It's featured on the boat. So Harrison, because I know you said one of your favorite scenes is, kind of showcasing some of his strengths. So I want to give you a chance to actually talk about how you feel about, how his powers are portrayed in this movie and like how strong he actually physically is. Cause I think they do a really good job.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you for that. It's something that I've always found interesting about the characters of Peter Parker. Random little story. When I was much younger, like in elementary school, I had a friend who was really into Spider-Man before I really was. And I remember like learning about Spider-Man from him because he had read the comics and things like that. And he's like, did you know that Spider-Man, if he didn't hold back, could punch a hole in your chest the size of an orange? And like that phrase, I don't know if that's true. I've never found any reference for that. But like that memory will never leave my head. Whether that's true or not, Spider-Man definitely has strength beyond what we normally see showcased. There's a lot of great comics where villains, it's usually Doc Ock too, will test Spider-Man by hurting his family, Aunt May or MJ or somebody, and you see more strength let out than we normally get. And I think that there are a lot of scenes in here with the fairy, the scene at the end with the Rumble, so many different things, the way he fights Vulture, where we see that there's a lot of untapped potential here that maybe Peter Parker doesn't even know yet. And I think that the film does a really, really good job of doing that he has so much that he just doesn't know how to use yet. Like the fairy scene. I mean, like that is a ton of weight that he's holding up. And ultimately he kind of fails just because he doesn't know how to use that strength. But we see that it's there. And I think while this film, I can't point you to a necessary scene that's like, okay, look at this. And factually, we can determine that Spider-Man's strength is this much. But we just see that there's a large potential there that Peter Parker is still figuring out. And that's, to me, the most exciting part about it. Not that I can factually prove to everyone that he has tons of strength, which I try to do anyway, but that it shows more than anything the potential there and how Spider-Man is trying to figure it out.
Yeah, Rob, I'll let you follow up on that. Any thoughts on his actual, how he's portrayed in this movie? Because certainly you saw it a little bit in Civil War when he's able to, hold up that runway or whatever object that Captain America, knocked down with his shield. But yeah, Harrison, I think you just said that so well about like that untapped potential and like seeing when he needs to, ultimately he fails, but there's something there where he definitely is not fully like full power at the moment.
He does have the same stupid adamantium bones that all the other versions of Spider-Man have had so far, where he can just go through block walls and just dust himself off. But I do want to talk about the scene Harrison referenced towards the end of the movie where he's buried under the rubble. And I'll tell you what is so, and I didn't pick up on this in previous watches of this movie, and it just jumped right off the screen to me this time. The way that Tom Holland portrays that moment where he's trapped, he's stuck, he is completely stuck. And I don't know if like anytime you were a kid and you found yourself like you crawled into something just to see if you could fit, and then you just got stuck, or like you put your hand or your foot in something and then you couldn't get it out and you're just stuck. And that fear and that not knowing of what to do, especially if there's nobody around to help you, is absolutely terrifying. And that's what we saw. We saw a scared kid. He'd got in way over his head. He's completely trapped. He doesn't know how to get out. There's nobody there to help him. And he's completely stuck. And the way that Tom Holland played that scene was incredible. It really, I mean, he just crushed that scene. And he realizes that he has to get himself out, not just because he's trapped for his own safety, but he needs to get himself out, or else bad things are going to happen, not just to people he loves, but many, many other people that he will never meet and that he's sworn to protect. And he has to find a way to push himself up. And there's a little bit of an Easter egg to a very famous scene from the comics where, you know, Peter is trapped in a sewer, and he, you know, finds this strength to push all this stuff up from on top of him. I think they have a couple of T-shirts out there with that scene on it. But I absolutely loved the way that Tom Holland did that scene.
Yeah, I think it's very well done. And I think the one thing too, just the little thing that I think adds to it too, is that while he is in that predicament, him saying, "Get up, Spider-Man," like him just motivating himself, but also like calling himself Spider-Man, I think is, Rob, connected to your point of, you know, these are not only are people going to get hurt that he cares about and knows, people are going to get hurt that he doesn't know. But as Spider-Man, he has, you know, made that pledge that, like, again, going back to Civil War, when you can do things that I can and you don't, and bad things happen, well, then they happen because of you. What he says to Tony as to why he's doing this, I take that scene and kick it back to Civil War of just him saying, like, I have these powers. I need to like, I have to get through this. I have to find a way to stop him, because otherwise this is because of me right now. If I don't stop him, then the people that get hurt are on me. So I think they do a really good job tying that in. I think the fact that he says, "Get up, Spider-Man," is more than just like, oh, we just want to use that. I just take a much deeper connection to it. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I choose to see it.
I just want to add that, oh, sorry, Rob. I just want to add that I love everything that both of you just said. That will forever probably be my favorite scene in all of the MCU. I talked about at the beginning how this scene just emotionally resonates with me and has really impacted me. And that's that scene. I think in the character of Spider-Man, and why I love Tony Stark in this film, is that we see the Peter Parker trying to live up the responsibility that Uncle Ben put on him and trying to be the hero. But it's hard to feel like you're doing a good job at that. And so there's a lot of validation that Peter seeks through Tony and the Stark internship, as he calls it. And that's gone. And now, because Tony said he's no longer Spider-Man. And there was a lot of outside validation that he needed to believe he was doing a good job at living up to his responsibility. And in that scene, he found that the value was intrinsic within himself, and believed in himself as Spider-Man. And it's just a very, very powerful scene. As you know, it's cool that he has the strength to lift all that stuff on top of him, but there's an emotional strength to believe in himself that he can, that makes the scene really powerful, like you were saying, Matt. So I just have to agree and throw in my bit there, because I loved everything.
And really, when you think back to the line, Matt, that you quoted from Civil War, I think that's a great representation of the challenge that the filmmakers had with bringing this character to the MCU. You know, Civil War comes out in 2016, I believe, and unless I'm wrong, Amazing Spider-Man 2 released in 2014. So we're only talking about a 2-year difference between iterations of a character. I mean, we'll go longer than that between films within the same franchise, with the same actor playing the same character, and they've already rebooted him within 2 years. So with a character like Spider-Man that is beloved as he is, that's been around for as long as he is, that fans have very distinct ideas of what he should be, to try to make this interpretation feel fresh and different and not the same thing that you've always seen, but still retain the hallmarks and the real keystones of who that character is and why fans love that character, and the kinds of things that would make fans completely go storming the castle gates if you get wrong. They walk that line very, very well with this portrayal of the character. And Matt, the line you mentioned, it doesn't say with great power comes great responsibility, but that's what he's insinuating, and we all know it. And he doesn't have to say it. And in this movie, he makes reference at different times. Peter says to May, he doesn't want to bother her or with all the things that she's gone through. He's clearly talking about the murder of Uncle Ben, but the name Ben Parker is never stated. The only thing we get that's even a remote reference, unless I'm forgetting something, is in Far From Home when he grabs the suitcase and it's got Ben's initials monogrammed on it. That's the only thing I can think of that's even acknowledging that a man named Ben Parker existed in the MCU. And I just really applaud everybody who worked on bringing this character together for the way they walk that line and walk that tightrope phenomenally well.
Yeah, I think you're both made excellent points. I think their discretion or their willingness to, again, not just tread the same water, so to speak, to find a way to say, okay, we realize this character has been rebooted twice in the span of, a very minuscule amount of time in the film world compared to, Rob, like you said, some other films where, you have the same actor or things like that. I really do applaud them for finding a way to bringing him into the MCU and making sure that it feels fresh, but also at the same time, there are elements that people who have grown up with Spider-Man and really resonate with this character, still recognize that this is Spider-Man without having to go through the same tropes. They're not trying to, they're not introducing him to a new generation, so to speak. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm saying that backwards. They're introducing him to, what they're trying to say as a new generation because the MCU has taken over everything. But at the same time, they're paying homage to people who know the character and are going, there's still things that, you can recognize about him, but we're trying to put a different spin on it while honoring what you already know about the character. I think they did a really good job.
Even just something as simple as the way they treat May Parker. Aunt May in the original Sam Raimi trilogy feels much more like his grandma. She talks like a grandma, just she's much older. The actress they cast. You move it forward to Sally Field with The Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah, that feels like somebody who's probably about his aunt. And that's really the way that relationship works. And that relationship works really well. So we've kind of seen those two, but the way they do May Parker in this, Marissa Tomei almost feels like a hybrid of three different relationships to Peter. She's a mother figure. She is kind of the cool aunt figure, but she also at many points almost feels like an older sister too. And it's very different, and the relationship is much more playful than what we've seen with the other two versions of live action Spider-Man on screen. And I enjoy that. They went for something different. It is really effective, and I love it. And I love at the end of this movie that she walks in and finds him with with his mask off, but the suit on in his room. I think that's such and I love how that carries forward into future films as well.
Yeah, I think the way that they portrayed this relationship is really good, and the fact that she does know at the end of this movie, I really like that a lot because, Rob, we talked about that where we would have liked to have seen more of that. So Harrison, where do you stand on that relationship, especially as, like you said, I mean, you mentioned it, you're bouncing back and forth here. It's almost like you're going through a multiverse portal yourself, going from one film to the other.
Yeah, it's messing with me. As much as I love the Raimi trilogy anime, this is my favorite version. Coming back to it, it's really easy to feel like Rob said it really well, a grandmotherly love towards Aunt May in the Raimi trilogy, and almost like a respect for the elder type thing, like a grandma. That's just really well said, Rob. Here, it again, to steal Rob's words, she feels like the aunt who's closest in age to you and who's really fun, who now has to be his mother figure. and that would be a really interesting relationship. And it's just a lot of fun. This film has has good humor. It's pretty lighthearted. It's a high school movie. It's a coming of age film, and it captures that I don't know, atmosphere really well. And Marissa Tomei's performance as Aunt May makes you understand. Let me put it this way: for Peter Parker to become another character, as we like to say he is, as Spider-Man, to be quippy and a little bit arrogant and cocky, to me, it feels like he gets that from this version of Aunt May. And I really like it for that reason.
That's a really good call out. I think that's perfectly said that, she's his aunt and she's his guardian, but at the same time, it's like she's young herself and clearly does things like, you're right. She's not the Aunt May from Spider-Man, 1 that's eating dinner at 3:30 in the afternoon. She is,
This is not the Aunt May that watches Matlock.
Right, exactly. Like, this is the Aunt May that's like, let's go rock climbing or something. like she's active. So Harrison, I think that was a really good point, that it feels like some of his sarcastic nature comes from her. And the MCU has done a lot of things right. They're not making all of this money because they're doing, it's like 50-50. It's, 80-20, maybe 90-10 for what they actually do right compared to what they do wrong. You don't take over the planet in the box office if you're close to being, towards the other end of doing things wrong. But the way that they cast certain characters, and think about everybody that we've gotten in the MCU, and I'm not saying she is up there with like some of these casting choices, but I think there is something to be said too for their decision to go with this younger aunt and this person in Marissa Tomei, picking her because I just, again, and it's not my job to think of these things, but would I have ever thought like, hey, Marissa Tomei as Aunt May, would I ever have thought as Chris Evans as Captain America, like the guy who played Human Torch and talked about Hemis and like the ridiculousness of those movies. Like, they have done so well with the castings, not just for their main characters, but some of these side characters that have stayed in these movies, like Happy. I mean, again, he's got a big role in the MCU and has, Jon Favreau for all his contributions to the MCU, but him actually being Happy, Marissa Tomei as Aunt May, I just think she's another one who I just have to hats off to Disney and the people behind this for making those choices, because again, I never would have thought of it.
Matt, you really hit it right. The big decisions, the big castings, yes, those nearly every single main character or even 1A level character, the casting is phenomenal. Up and down the line, though, even some of the supporting characters, even characters that have minimal screen time but are reoccurring, really nail it. I mean, other than Don Cheadle, that Matt, you've said before you didn't particularly care for as Rhodey, what can you think of throughout the MCU where the casting was just a complete whiff?
Yeah, I mean, look at Kat. Look at Kat Dennings in Thor, and then in WandaVision. Like, she's fantastic.
Absolutely. Actors you've heard of before and seen before do phenomenal things when they're in the MCU, and actors that you've maybe never heard before, or maybe didn't realize you'd seen in a lesser role in some TV show or some movie before, that get an opportunity to do something else. You go, wow, yeah, that's really well done. I think not just the storytelling, but the casting has been one of the consistent things that's led to the perennial success of the MCU.
I mean, you could really just go down the list here for Spider-Man. Zendaya as Michelle Jones. I love this version of the character. Every single time it cuts to her and she says something like, I don't even know how to, like, dark, is great. Jacob Batalon as Ned. Tony Revolori as Flash. This is without a doubt the best version of Flash we've ever got.
Yes,
100%.
Donald Glover as Aaron Davis. I mean, like, come on. Of course. Whoever plays their teacher, I'm trying to figure out who it is here. I mean, he's fantastic. I love him and their other teacher in No Way Home. The two of them together not No Way Home, Far From Home. The two of them together, I think, are hilarious. So, like, even when we do cut away from these big characters, I mean, Spider-Man, as we know, is a rich universe with lots of characters. And every single one of them feels like great versions of that. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it makes... Boy, it just makes you stop. But again, the side characters and his friends, and eventually at the end when she's like, "Oh, my friends call me MJ," and like you said, there's some lighthearted humor to this movie, and I think they placed it at all the right times. And when Ned's like, "I thought you didn't have any friends," like, I feel like there's so much that they hit right at opportunistic moments to, again, Rob, like you said, even when this movie gets dark and there's, you're sitting there and you're like, oh man, it never feels to the point where like this movie is not fun, so to speak. Even when it's dark, this movie is fun because it's so engaging, and the people that are in this movie they seem like they're having such a good time with it. And I think that just really helps the audience when you can feel, whether or not it's true, I feel like the actors enjoyed working on this project, and it shows through on the screen.
Definitely. And I'll tell you the other thing that you think about this, the only thing you can really say about this movie to really sum it up to somebody who's never seen it before is this movie is just so charming. What percentage of this movie do you think on your most recent rewatch you spent with a big smile on your face? Just percentage wise. I'm going to say for me, it's like 90 to 95% of this movie. I have a big smile on my face. I'm either laughing out loud or it's just such a fun, whatever's happening, even the action scenes where Peter's in peril, like you're enjoying what's happening because he's laughing about it. He's using humor as a defense mechanism to get him through some of these like perilous situations that at age 15, he has absolutely no concept of how to like handle what's happening to him. So he goes to those defense mechanisms, and the CG is well done. So that never really pulls you out of it. There's not a lot of bad scripting. There's not a lot of bad dialogue. I spent 95% of this movie with a smile on my face.
Yeah, I think that's a really good percentage. Harrison, go ahead.
I just got to say, I didn't express my praise for Jennifer Connelly as Karen or Sue Lady. I mean, another great addition. I feel like between her and Ned, the film has genuine quips throughout the entire film that don't feel like a Marvel quip. That's one of my biggest problems with the Marvel films is like, they have all just become quippy constantly, and it's almost like a self-aware quippiness that I don't really like. But that does not ever come across here. Like Ned says just the dumbest things to Spider-Man. Like he's like, "Should we tell everyone?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Can I tell everyone?" Like he's just funny. like a dumb kid. Like he's a high schooler that's just funny. And then Karen is great too. Like she's so. I don't know. When he falls off the sign, he's like, "What just happened?" She's like, "You jumped off a sign and landed on your face." Like, it's fantastic. And it makes the film really, really charming throughout. The whole thing is that, yeah, we are handling really important and weighty themes and character progressions and coming of age stories. And there's great performances and all these wonderful things, but it's also just charming. And you're endeared to the characters because you're not just told like, "Oh my gosh, this is really serious." And Peter Parker's got to be Spider-Man because his uncle died, and it's like really trying to take itself serious. It takes itself serious enough that it allows people to be naturally funny without having to be like the Marvel self-aware quip that I'm not a huge fan of. And it works.
Rob, I think you brought this up on, I think maybe it was the Infinity War episode where you did, or no, I think it was when we were talking about Thor Ragnarok, where you did talk about how, some of these movies have tend to, I think exactly how Harrison said it, become almost too quippy. Like there's jokes just for the sense of a joke. And I know I talked about that in Endgame, where it's like Thor is going through real depression, and it's meant to be made a joke of, like, oh, you've got Cheese Whiz and things like that, where again, this movie, it balances the line very, very well.
Yeah, I think Harrison did say it well. The silliness that we get with some of the humor that I think in the MCU, I mean, it's certainly a part of Guardians of the Galaxy, but that's just sort of the type of movie that was supposed to be. It was never supposed to be anything, but it has a talking raccoon. Like, I mean, come on, how is that not just silly? When you get to Ragnarok, though, that's where the movie, that's where the films in general really start to get just kind of, cheesy funny for the sake of it. Now don't get me wrong, I laugh out loud at every single joke in Thor Ragnarok, but I can't say I necessarily love the impact it's had on the MCU as a whole. That you can definitely draw a line from that film forward and see the change in the way they present humor.
Yeah, I definitely think that's really like a turning point in the MCU, just like you said, where it really gets towards that dynamic.
But this movie avoids that. I mean, the parts that are funny are funny because it's actually funny, not because it doesn't belong or it seems silly that they're trying to make light of something that's actually pretty serious. And I realize that sounds like a contradiction to what I just said about how when Peter's in danger as Spider-Man, he goes to humor, but that's his self-defense mechanism. Like that's how he copes with that stress a lot of people do that, by the way. Like the reason why people have like a nervous laugh is that's a defense mechanism to like kind of laugh about it or try to make a joke of it. When people are grieving, in many cases, they find solace in humor. It's a lot of people do it. It's not just Spider-Man.
Yeah. Harrison, anything you want to follow up with on that point?
No, I think I've pretty much said everything that I want to. Let me just rack my brain here for like half a second. Yeah, I'm good.
I gotta catch for a second.
It was just like one of those moments where you just realize, like, yeah, I'm satisfied and you don't know what else to do.
Yeah, so I want to ask this question because, Harrison, how many movies have you gotten to so far between the three different versions of Spider-Man?
Okay, so I've got Spider-Man 1. Then I watched The Amazing Spider-Man. Then I watched Spider-Man Homecoming. Then I watched Spider-Man 2. And that's how I have so far.
Okay, so Rob, you and I talked about this on the last episode, and I'm going to branch this question into the final segment of the show, which is roll credits. This is where we talk about maybe any interesting facts about the film, some of the box office that it had behind the scenes, and give her an overall rating system. But Harrison, obviously, by the time we get to No Way Home, you'll have seen these other movies, relatively recently. But Rob, you and I talked about how I said at the end of our review for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, maybe it wasn't right at the end, but during talking about it, Andrew Garfield was really, really testing me as my favorite version of Peter Parker. I'll start with you, Rob. Watching Homecoming, has Tom Holland, has he distanced himself again, or is it still close?
So I knew you were going to ask me this.
Uh-oh.
And so I started thinking in my head, like, okay, gun to your head, pick one. Who is your Spider-Man? And that's really hard, I think, because no matter which one of those guys you pick, I think this is one of those things where films should be enjoyed. Like, watch movies and TV because you enjoy it. If you want to, I don't think people should take it so seriously where I don't know. Like, you should never name call somebody over their opinions on a movie, unless they like The Last Jedi, in which case call them dumb, please. They are. Outside of that, had to slide it in. Outside of that, like, if you tell me Andrew Garfield's your favorite version of the character, great, I understand it. If you tell me Tom Holland is your favorite version of the character, great, I understand it. If you tell me Toby, because that's just what you grew up with, like, I understand that part of it, even though he's probably my third. I'm going to probably have to go with Tom Holland's interpretation, if for no other reason than we've seen him across 5 films now, I think he's been in. Even though he's only gotten 2 solo films, and he was a piece of Civil War. He was in a good piece of Infinity War, and we got him in Endgame, although not in a huge capacity. We've had more time to see the character grow. We've had more time to see him do some things, and it feels like there's a future for the character. To watch the Andrew Garfield version of the character, it's hard not to watch that without realizing that it's just kind of sad that there's no payoff. There won't really be closure to that interpretation of the character. There won't be a great send-off. There won't be a great third act for him, unless something happens in Far From Home that I haven't seen yet that completely changes that, but that's got to feel very unlikely. So I guess for those reasons, I'm going to pick Tom Holland.
Yeah, Harrison, I'll pose the same question to you. Do you have somebody that stands out? I will just say, and I'll leave it completely at this. Again, I will echo Rob's statements. If you like Tobey Maguire and that is your Spider-Man, which I know a lot of people do, that is fantastic. I am not here to argue that point. I can tell you, though, that he is definitely third on my list for Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And he's like, there is a gap between 2 and 3, but I really do have to say, I am struggling with this question on my own, because I was so surprised at how attached I was to Andrew Garfield going back and watching the 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies.
Man, this is such a hard question to answer. I haven't yet seen Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 ever. I've never seen Spider-Man 3. So the 2 of the films I have left, I haven't seen at all.
Wait, what?
Wow. I've never seen Spider-Man 3 or the Amazing Spider-Man 2. So.
I honestly did not know that. So if you guys just heard a noise, that was my chin hitting my desk.
Yeah. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I couldn't be here for that episode, because I hadn't watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it was just impossible to fit it in my schedule. I was like, I can't be in this podcast. I'd have nothing to say. But to answer your question, honestly, right now, in the blender of the 3 Peter Parkers that my head is right now, the honest answer is whichever one I'm currently watching. And I think that's the credit to each film, that in that moment, that is my Peter Parker. That is my Spider-Man. Yeah, I had some problems with that version of Peter Parker and Spider-Man in Spider-Man 1. Obviously, if you listen to the Amazing Spider-Man film or podcast, we had some things to say about that. I wouldn't say that Tom Holland is perfect either. I don't think any one of them I could say is perfect, but they are all done well enough that in the moment I'm watching them, that's my Spider-Man. Like I kind of expected you to have me answer this question. So I had literally just finished The Amazing Spider-Man 2. No, not The Amazing Spider-Man, just Spider-Man 2. And I was like, okay, yeah, Tobey's my new favorite Peter Parker. And then we started talking about this podcast, and I got thinking about Spider-Man Homecoming again, since I just watched it, and Tom Holland. I was like, oh, okay, maybe not. So I really think the honest answer is whichever one I'm watching. But if I had to pick one, if I was going to die, I would probably say Tom Holland, just because I think he's the current one. That's kind of cheating. I have a really, really hard time, because I love, if it was just Spider-Man Homecoming and like Infinity War, Tom Holland, without a doubt. I have a lot of problems with Far From Home. We'll see if that happens again on Revisit. I'm actually really excited for that. And so it makes it hard for me to say Tom Holland because of how I feel about Far From Home. But right now, because we're talking about Homecoming, Tom Holland.
That's, that is really, really interesting because, um, we'll do the same thing that we did for Homecoming when we talk about Far From Home, because I know I have Far From Home ranked much farther when Rob and I did our recap than he did. He had Far From Home pretty low on the list, and it sounds like, obviously, like you said, you have some problems with Far From Home. So I will be interested to hear both of you, because I can't imagine mine dropping that far, but I'll be interested to see where you originally had this. I'll know where Rob has it because I can pull up our old rankings. Uh, but I'll be interested to see what you guys think about it on a rewatch, and if some of the things you had issues with have changed, or if they still remain, as present as the first time through.
Well, and that's a large part of what we get in the MCU is very much that recency. You take, I think most people's top 3, top 4, top 5 are probably fairly set until something new comes along that's really mind blowing and good, which by all accounts, No Way Home could be, from everything we're hearing from the early previews. But I think once you get past 5, once you get past 7, I think for a lot of people, films 8 through probably 19, you could probably flex up or down a couple places based on whichever one you saw most recently, because the average standard of quality in the MCU is so high. Your bottom 3 probably not moving up anytime soon, no matter how many times you rewatch it. Like Thor: The Dark World it's at the bottom. They can keep releasing new movies. It doesn't matter. They're not going to likely release. I haven't seen Eternals yet, and I've heard a lot of people didn't like it. Although Harrison, you liked it, I think. I don't see me disliking Eternals when I get around to seeing it less than, or disliking it more than I dislike Dark World. Hulk was okay. Ultron, I didn't like at all. And those are my bottom 3. I don't see anything getting lower than that. But the rest of that lineup, I think just whichever one you've seen most recently will probably move up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. One thing about this movie is it did do very well. It was the second highest grossing Spider-Man movie at the time, behind Spider-Man 3, because so many people were, excited for Spider-Man 3 at the time, and then quickly that tailed off. But I would like to ask you guys, do you have anything that you found like interesting about this movie, like anything that you read behind the scenes? Because I know I do have a couple of things.
First, I'll just add, just to close out the thoughts on Far From Home. When I did the ranking for the Basement Binge, it used to be when there was 3 hosts, myself, Kate, and Kilton. And so we took an average between our 3 rankings, just to give you an idea. Far From Home, for our average, I'm not giving you mine yet because that would ruin it, but for the average was 21 out of 23.
Whoa.
So, yeah, we'll see what happens on a rewatch. Anyway, no, I don't really have any details. I just had to say that because I thought it was funny.
That's going to be so interesting. One thing,
Wow.
Harrison, I think it was you who mentioned, Sony wanted, Tony Stark in this, because originally it was supposed to be Nick Fury that was having that mentor role for Peter in this movie. But, Sony really was, hey, we'd really, really like for Robert Downey Jr. to be in this. And, realistically, they put him on the poster, which I think was a little bit of bait and switch in a good way. But man, they promoted it like he was really going to be in this movie. And even if you guys remember, I don't know if you do, there's even a trailer where Peter is swinging and Iron Man is right next to him, which never happens in the movie. So that was just done for a promotional trailer. But yeah, Nick Fury was originally supposed to be the mentor role in this.
I actually do remember that trailer, and regardless of the reason they made that choice to switch him out, I think it's so much more effective. Think about just the scene where, Peter's yelling at what he thinks is just a robot suit, and Tony walks out of it to admonish him in person. That was very effective. Just that moment where he's actually there. That whole scene is really, really good. I don't think that Nick Fury would have been able to have that sort of that tough love. I think he's too operational. Tony is much more emotional. And I think that scene was much more effective with Tony than it ever could have been with Nick Fury.
Yeah, absolutely. Harrison, were you saying something? I'm sorry there.
Oh, and I was just going to say, I do have one detail. We've probably all seen it. It's the poster for Spider-Man Homecoming where it has him in his like yellow jacket in the Spider-Man suit with headphones on, like laying on the ground.
Yes.
Do you know the poster I'm talking about?
Yeah,
That's actually Tom Holland asleep on set. They were just filming and he was tired, so he laid on the ground and took a nap, and they took a picture of him and used it as a poster. That's a great poster, but I find it funny that he's just, taking a nap.
It really is like a great poster. And so that's really funny because when I saw that poster, I was like, oh man, like that's such a great like insight into the fact that like he's a kid and probably like he probably is tired. Like, think about the times when, like, you've seen in a comic book or something, like Peter just like he swings up to a rooftop and like he's sitting there. Like, I know sometimes if I just sit for a second and I'm tired from a long day's work, like, your eyes start to droop and you start to get that bob neck and everything like that. Like, imagine fighting bad guys and swinging around the city and then like stopping for 5 seconds. So I always thought that poster was kind of like an insight, like into, this, like, he's a kid, he's fighting crime, he's probably tired. So that's actually really funny to me that he was asleep and they took a picture of it. All right. So, Harrison, I'm going to let you go first here because we're going to get to our overall rating system. It's 1 out of 5 reels, not to be confused with the watch rating of replayability. But I'm going to let you go first as to where you have this movie with 1 through 5.
Of my rating. You know what? On this rewatch, I'm going to give it a solid 4.5. It was a 5 before for me. Something about it this time, I don't know if it's just me wanting to like, I don't know, some like weird sense of pride that it can't be perfect. I don't know. There's something that just, I, for whatever reason, doesn't feel like I can say 5. I can't point to what it is, but I don't know. 4.5. A really, really high 4.5. Solid. Just doesn't feel like a 5. Not quite, but is really, really great. And maybe it's because I've watched it so much. That could be a reason too.
Yeah, I'll go next. I'll let Rob go last because my rating is exactly the same. It's 4.5. I had it at 4.5 before this. It has not changed. I don't think it is absolutely perfect, but I do get a ton of enjoyment out of this movie. I think it has so many good things going for it. So I also have a 4.5.
So I finished this movie and was fully prepared to be like, oh yeah, this is 5 reels of entertainment. And it probably is. If you tell me this is 5 reels for you, okay, I get it. It's 4 3/4 reels for me. I have virtually no complaints or things that don't work for me about this movie. However, there is one thing that I really do dislike about this movie that makes it hard to ignore, and it's the thing that keeps it from being a 5. And it's the biggest single problem is that at no point do any of the adults treat Peter like a colleague or a peer or somebody that they should trust or should listen to. They're so dismissive of him for comedic reasons, but outside of that, like, it doesn't really make sense why they are so dismissive of him. I know that like Peter's kind of blown up Happy's phone, but when he starts providing like good information, like they should be following up on, it's dismissed. And then when he does give them good information at the ferry and Tony calls the FBI in, most of the conflict of this movie could have been avoided simply by the adults listening to Peter. Or if Tony would have been like, oh, hey, Peter, we looked into that thing. Great tip, kid. Keep feeding us that information. This is what we're doing. If he had done that, Peter never would have shown up there, never would have chased those guys on his own, and he would have felt validated in what he was doing was right and would have stuck to what Stark was asking him to do. Those are the kinds of things like those things are only happening because the plot dictates it to happen, not because it actually makes sense. And that's kind of the biggest thing that keeps me from giving it a 5 is just a lot of the conflict actually doesn't need to happen. But so many other things in this movie work so well. The entertainment value is so high. You can throw this movie on anytime you want, have a total blast with it. You don't have to have seen anything prior to this. If you don't want to, you're still going to enjoy it.
I think that's a very valid point to close that out, where maybe they should have listened to him a little bit more and not, if you're going to bring this kid into the Avengers and you're going to give him this suit, maybe you do trust him a little bit more. So I think that's a very valid point.
And there's really it's a high level of danger Tony keeps putting this high school kid in, and then he just drops him. Like, he doesn't give him any additional mentoring. He just only kind of yells at him when he steps out of line. Like, he doesn't teach him to be a hero. He says, I wanted you to be better than me. Okay, so he gives him the suit and then he ignores him. Like, at no point does he work with him and try to teach him what to do, how to approach situations, how to avoid danger, how to stay safe. He and Happy just can't be bothered by him, really. And I think that's my biggest problem with this movie, and the thing that keeps it from being a 5.
All right. Well, I like your points. I'm really looking forward to talking about Far From Home with you two. But before we sign off, Harrison, I'll give you the floor first. Talk about the Basement Binge. Obviously, if you've been listening to the show, you should know Harrison very well. But if this is the first episode that you have listened to, first, I will say thank you. Hopefully it makes you want to come back for more. But Harrison, talk about the Basement Binge, and what is your Spider-Man week? We've kind of gone over that, but let listeners know what they're looking for on that channel.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do that. Before I do that, I just have to mention 2 things. I feel like I always do this. If I don't mention these, I won't sleep well. The first is for you, Matt. I had this written down. I had to go to my notes. I couldn't remember. When they were preparing for the film, the cast got together with the director, John Watts, and they all watched a bunch of John Hughes films together. It was in Tom Holland's apartment that he was staying in for filming in Atlanta, and they just watched a bunch of movies, including Ferris Bueller's Day Off, referenced in the film, but also The Breakfast Club. And I know you love that film, so I thought you would appreciate that.
I do.
Yeah.
I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, catching that coming of age story. The other thing I just want to mention is the score by Michael Giacchino. This theme of Spider-Man is one of my favorites. I just love the score. One thing that makes me kind of sad about the newer No Way Home trailers is we have that first No Way Home trailer has such a great version of the Spider-Man theme that I really hope shows up in the film. Anyway, to talk about the Basement Binge, it's a movie review podcast hosted by myself. It's has a lot of rambling, like you just heard me go on, because I like to talk about movies. Currently, I'm talking about Spider-Man. My brain is scrambled eggs with all these Spider-Man films I have. Just wanted to prepare myself for Spider-Man No Way Home coming out. And I wasn't able to be there for the previous Spider-Man episodes, so I'm catching up, just releasing super short, 10 to 15-minute episodes, one every day leading up to Spider-Man No Way Home, which is going to be a lot of fun. Some Christmas episodes coming out, potentially a Matrix, if I can work that in. I don't know. My schedule's nuts right now. It seems like when I'm busiest in life, my brain's like, hey, let's also do this that you don't have time for. And I try and tell myself no, but then my brain's like, no, you have to do it. So, yeah, I'm still trying to iron that out for myself. The Basement Binge, available wherever you get podcasts. Matt and Rob have been on the show a lot. I like to binge movies. I like to binge series. Started with the MCU. So lots of fun things coming up. Just had Nolan November. So if you like Christopher Nolan, like I do, go check out those episodes. Those were just released, and those were a ton of fun. So thank you for that, Matt, for the chance to do that. I love being here on the show. It's always a blast.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of fun. I think, we've certainly, this isn't one of them, but boy, we've certainly put ourselves in some holes here with some of the series. I think Harrison, towards the end, the Fast and the Furious series that we did, that was a lot of fun. But certainly some of those movies got increasingly hard to watch, as they really just went into the realm of what is happening. But it's always fun to actually talk about, those movies. So I'm still saying that 1 month we should just get together and do like Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Elektra, Catwoman, Batman, and Robin. I think we need to purposely pick like,
oh wow,
all of these terrible things.
Green Lantern.
Yes, Green Lantern, and just put ourselves through that and talk about those movies. Because I don't even think we have to talk about the movies. I think we could just do an entire riff track about those. So that is still something that I'm trying to actually kind of start to plant the seeds for with what I just said. So maybe a little insight to what the three of us could maybe be doing here once some of this craziness dies down. But really, when will it? You got Boba Fett, you've got Matrix, you've got, I'm actually excited for Morbius to see where the heck that thing falls into this.
I'm so excited for that.
This twisted world of the multiverse, because Morbius looks like it takes place in Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland's universe at the same time, for God's sakes. So there's just so much coming out that it's like, man, to maybe get rewatches in of things that haven't come out, it just seems really hard. But hopefully maybe we can do something like that. So Rob, before we officially sign off, let listeners know where they can interact with Matt Goes to the Movies and the Basement Binge. We've got our social media pages, so let listeners know if they like this episode or the show in general. How do they keep coming back?
Well, the best thing to do, of course, would be to subscribe. That way it is right there for you, and whatever your favorite application is to listen to podcasts. Certainly subscribing keeps you up to date. Like the show on all of the your social media pages of choice, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. It's a great way to stay up to date with some of the things. Matt's been doing a lot of great stuff on both Instagram and TikTok. Harrison has as well, posting polls and things like that for both shows. It's a great way to interact, tell the show your thoughts, what you think. They've both been reading a lot of listener submissions on air, just different thoughts and things like that. That's pretty cool to hear. So please, make sure you reach out through those different channels. You can email Matt Goes to the Movies at mgttmpodcast@gmail.com. It's just Matt Goes to the Movies. It's the initials of each letter, podcast@gmail.com. And Harrison, it's bingebasement@gmail.com. I have that correct, don't I?
Yes.
bingebasement@gmail.com. Email the show, give your thoughts. If there's a particular episode you really enjoyed, or there's a you kind of got a hot take that's a little bit different that you want to share, maybe it'll be featured in a future episode. But I definitely, I'm going to assume I speak for all three of us in that hearing listener feedback, listener interaction is really super cool. People we've never met and will sadly never meet are listening to this right now, and we'd like to hear from you. We really enjoy hearing from you, actually. So please, if you're somebody who's not sure if you think that I mean you when I say please interact with the show, I do mean you. Yes, you, the person with the headphones on right now, or listening to this through your car. Yes. Interact with the show. Please leave a like, leave a comment on any of the social media pages, and certainly check out Podchaser. Both shows are available on Podchaser to leave a review. It's a phenomenal way to let others know that this is a show worth checking out.
Yeah, thank you so much to the two of you for being here. Listeners, thank you for tuning in once again. I cannot believe that we are almost at the end, and No Way Home is coming. It almost feels like as big a deal as Endgame, which I know we kind of all talked about, like, wow, yeah. How do you top this? Like, where do we go from here? And certainly some of the things that I have heard, so far the reviews have been, I have not seen any spoilers yet because the world premiere has happened, but it certainly seems like this movie is going to deliver on what fans are hoping for. So, and certainly with the pandemic, I mean, this movie, they're projecting to do over $200 million on the weekend, which if this hits that during the pandemic, like, this is insane. There is no telling what this movie will make, especially if it's good, because people will go back to see this, or they will tell people, like, look, you know, if you can get through it, like, whatever your feeling is on if you want to go out in public, that's not what I'm here to talk about. You need to go see this, though, in theaters if you can get out. So I'm going to be insanely interested to see. I'm also going to try and do an immediate reaction coming out of the theater, because I'll be going Friday night. Unfortunately, not until 10:50 at night, which means it'll have basically all day Thursday and all day Friday for people to be out. So I'll definitely have to probably go internet dark on those 2 days so I don't get spoiled. But my plan is to, out of the theater, actually do like a live like reaction and hopefully just get some fans' thoughts in, like, as I'm walking out of the movie theater for the social media pages. I think that'll be kind of cool to try and interact with people that have just seen the movie, because I know the theater that I'm in is completely sold out. There is not a seat left. So hoping to do something a little different after I get out of that movie before we post an official review on Matt Goes to the Movies. So, listeners, thank you so much for being here. We are, almost at the end here with Spider-Man, moving on to Far From Home. Until next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.